I was swirling cream into my coffee in the cabin's cozy kitchen when the yelling broke the morning silence, faint at first, like a trapped animal, but growing shrill enough to rattle the windows. I cracked open the front door and saw her Margaret, the HOA president, in a loud floral sundress and glittering sandals, hammering on my locked forest gate like she was staging a protest. Her voice screeched through the misty air, proclaiming her guests had a fundamental right to relax. Not a polite request, not a neighborly favor, but a full-on constitutional claim, as if she'd pinned it in some delusional manifesto called the Edict of Entitled Getaways. Her words cut like a buzzsaw, and behind her sprawled a circus. 6 cars, a folding table sagging with store-bought snacks, 3 lawn chairs, and a dozen people dressed for a wine tasting, not trespassing on my private land. One guy, already popping a beer, lounged against my fence post like he was charging it rent. I stayed silent, sipping my coffee slowly, watching Margaret melt down like a bad souffle. The gate solid oak, iron-bolted was locked with a key only I and Ellen, my caretaker, held. Margaret was about to discover that assumptions don't unlock anything. She clutched the gate's bars, her voice cracking as she shouted again, her authority wobbling like a tightrope walker in a storm. I stepped off the porch, boots crunching on gravel, and said nothing until I was close. "Margaret," I said, voice steady as the pines, "this isn't a community park. It's my property, and your guests are trespassing." Her jaw twitched like her brain hit a glitch. I turned back toward the cabin. That's when she yelled, desperate and defiant. "You can't lock out nature." I kept walking, tossing back. "Funny, you didn't mind blocking my road last winter when I refused your fake snow removal fee." Her crowd shifted. A guy muttered he'd been told this was public land. A woman with a yoga mat whispered to Margaret, asking if she'd actually booked the place. Margaret spun on them like a cornered politician, barking that it was a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was calculated, and we both knew it. This didn't start with her gate-rattling tantrum. 3 months earlier, Margaret asked to hold a small gathering in my clearing. I said yes, naive and trying to be neighborly, as long as it stayed low-key. My mistake was sharing the gate code. That opened Pandora's box. Her gathering morphed into a weekend picnic, then a noisy birthday party with a generator, then a 2-day wellness retreat, with porta-potties and strangers rifling through my woodshed. The breaking point was finding 2 sunbathers on my deck, claiming Margaret said the lodge was communal. That's when I changed the locks and started keeping receipts. Margaret had planned this latest stunt without asking, banking on me being aware that she could bully her way in if I showed up. She'd been HOA president for 5 years, ruling this scattered mountain community like a self-appointed queen with a clipboard and a grudge. My lodge, though, wasn't under her thumb. I'd bought it from a family who'd built it on a grandfathered plot, exempt from HOA control. Margaret didn't respect boundaries, only influence. She'd once tried to fine me for leaving my porch light on too late. I sent her my deed's exemption clause. She retaliated by planting an HOA sign on my road. I ripped it down. It disappeared again last week, likely to make her stunt look official. From the deck, coffee still warm, I watched Margaret rant, trying to convince her guests I'd cave. One asked to use my bathroom. She turned to me, voice syrupy with fake kindness, but I raised a hand. "Margaret, you're trespassing. Leave." She didn't move, not immediately. People like her don't. They thrive on drama or force. She launched into a speech about community values, but I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Her eyes widened. "The sheriff." I nodded. "Sheriff Daniels loves a trespassing call, especially after your last fiasco." She lunged forward, not violent but frantic, apologizing through clenched teeth while waving her guests to pack up. Chairs folded, snacks vanished, and someone tipped over a lemonade dispenser in the scramble. 10 minutes later, their cars roared off. Margaret lingered, gripping the gate, shaking with fury but playing composed. "You didn't have to escalate," she hissed. "I didn't," I said. "You did." I locked eyes with her. "Next time, Ellen files the papers." That stung. Ellen, my caretaker, was once HOA's secretary before Margaret ousted her. Margaret paled, stormed to her car, and peeled out, gravel spraying. I thought she'd slink away, regroup, maybe start a smear campaign. But Margaret was like kudzu, ignore her, and she spreads. That night, reading an old journal, I found a note from when I met her. Beware Margaret. Smiles like a trap. She'd shown up with a clipboard, calling it a welcome audit. I told her my land was an HOA property. She muttered about historical zones and snooped anyway. A week later, she slid a letter under my door listing violations like improper deck stain. I hung it in the outhouse. Her real power play came when I shared the gate code for a community forest day. It started small but ballooned into a party with lanterns, a Bluetooth speaker, and kids climbing near my propane tank. A stranger poked through my tool shed, claiming it was shared. I told him to back off. They left wine glasses in the moss and a yoga mat nailed to my railing. I texted Margaret, demanding answers. She called me unneighborly. I changed the code and told her to forget it. But Margaret didn't forget. Strangers kept arriving for forest sessions, saying she'd shared the code. I confronted her with my deed and incident list. She feigned shock, blaming guest confusion. I mentioned my security cameras. She flinched. Then the HOA posted about division at the general store. Ellen warned me. New locks. Expect noise. She was right. Margaret threw a birthday bash while I was gone, with coolers, lawn games, and plastic lanterns. Ellen took photos. I sent them to Margaret with a new code and a warning. Do this again, I call the sheriff. She called it hostile. I called it my land. 2 weeks of silence followed, but it was the kind that hums with tension. A manila envelope appeared under my truck's wiper, listing fake HOA violations, non-participation, event obstruction, hostile demeanor. Margaret was crafting a narrative, painting me as a hermit threatening her HOA paradise. I ignored it, stacked firewood, and watched her play monarch at community events, her smile strained. Then came the legal blow, a notice from a law firm, alleging I violated HOA bylaws and demanding mediation or a lawsuit. I laughed, then called Ellen. She brought old HOA maps, proving my land's exemption since 1989. I called a lawyer friend and Sheriff Daniels, who chuckled. Community enforcement, right? My lawyer sent a cease and desist with the exemption. The sheriff warned Margaret about harassment. Days later, someone egged my mailbox. Then leaflets appeared under my door, preaching community erosion. Margaret was fraying. Her final gambit came on a holiday weekend. Ellen and I heard music drifting through the trees spa, tunes mixed with yoga chants. At my gate, propped open with a gnome holding a good vibes only sign, Margaret staged a relaxation rally. Tables with pastel cloths, a generator, a massage station, and a banner reading Forest Wellness Day stood on my land. Margaret, in a floppy hat, grinned like she'd won. I recorded it all. Margaret, you're trespassing, I said. Everyone here is. 10 minutes to leave, or I call the sheriff. Her smile hardened. This is for the community, she insisted. I shook my head and called my lawyer, then Sheriff Daniels. Ellen handed me binders of HOA records, showing Margaret's years-long scheme to claim my land. The sheriff arrived, music stopped, and guests packed up, mortified. One shouted, "You said you had permission." Margaret ignored them, pacing, unraveling. I told the sheriff to issue a warning, not charges yet. Margaret sent a final HOA letter, claiming I'd created an exclusionary environment. I drove to the county office, got stamped parcel records, and hired a real estate attorney. He drafted a letter barring further HOA claims. The deputy confirmed Margaret had tried this with others. Then I went public, posting the full saga online with videos, photos, and records. The community exploded. Neighbors shared their Margaret Stories fake fines, rigged votes. A petition for her removal gained 70 signatures. At an emergency HOA meeting, I laid out the facts: gate code abuse, trespassing, legal harassment. The room clapped not loud, but firm. Margaret was voted out, barred from the board for 5 years. She stormed off, keys rattling. Margaret filed a desperate lawsuit, claiming emotional distress. In court, my evidence maps, footage, emails demolished her case. The judge dismissed it, saying, "Treating something as yours doesn't make it yours." Margaret stared at the floor. Outside, Ellen handed me coffee, grinning. Checkmate. I nodded, but knew Margaret's kind don't quit. She sent consultants to assess my lodge, claiming it was an HOA asset. I sent them packing with a cease and desist. Then I partnered with a retreat company, granting controlled access to my clearing in my terms, with a clause, access by landowner, not HOA. That night, under the stars, I breathed the mountain air. Margaret had spun a tale of control, but truth prevailed. The forest chose its guardian not through votes, but through unrelenting resolve.